You know, when you get older, people expect you to be quiet. They expect you to fade away, to stop being involved, to let the younger generation take the reins. I tried to do that. I really did. My name is David. I'm 68 years old, retired, widowed. And for most of my life, I believed that if you loved your children enough, they would love you back. That if you gave them everything, they'd remember. Turns out, that's not always true. It started 2 years ago, just after the holidays. But to understand how I ended up where I did, standing on the sidewalk with my things in a garbage bag, you need to know what things were like before. I used to be proud of the life I built. My wife, Linda, was my rock. She passed away 6 years ago, and it broke me in ways I still don't like to talk about. But even then, I held on, for Jason, my only son. Jason was never a bad kid. He was bright, quiet, always had his head in the clouds. He loved books, hated yard work, and couldn't fix a leaking faucet to save his life. Linda used to say he had a gentle soul. I liked that. He was close to his mother, but I always figured he'd grow into his own kind of man. I just had to be patient. After Linda died, I tried to be strong for him. He was already married by then, to a wonderful young woman named Emily. She was the kind of daughter I never had, attentive, warm, thoughtful. She'd text me on birthdays, send over leftovers on Sundays, even framed a photo of Linda for their living room shelf. When Jason and Emily moved into their house, it felt like a new chapter for all of us. What Jason didn't know, what I never told him, was that I paid for that house. Every dollar. From my retirement fund. It was supposed to be a gift, a way to help them start their life. But I didn't want him to feel indebted or emasculated. So I just signed the deed over to his name. Quietly. Like a good father. They had 2 boys, Oliver and Max. I loved those kids like the sun itself. I'd pick them up from school, teach them how to ride bikes, even help with science projects. Emily called me Super Grandpa. And Jason. He tolerated me. That's the only word for it. He wasn't rude, just distant. As if my presence reminded him of how much he wasn't me. I thought I was imagining it at first. But over time, it became clear. He didn't like when I gave advice. Didn't like when the boys ran to hug me first. Didn't like when Emily asked me to fix things around the house. He wanted space. So I gave it. I came around only when asked. I stayed no longer than needed. I watched from the sidelines. And when the holidays came, I sat quietly at the end of the table, smiling, listening, pretending I wasn't aching to feel included. Still, I told myself, this is what love looks like. Quiet. Steady. Sacrificial. Then, everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning in March when I got the call. Emily had been in a car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light. She was killed instantly. I don't remember packing. I don't remember locking the door behind me. All I remember is the sound of Jason's voice on the phone. Cold, robotic. Emily's gone. I arrived at their house the same evening. It looked lifeless. The lights were off. Toys scattered in the front yard, untouched. Her favorite wind chime on the porch creaked softly in the wind, like it was crying. I rang the bell. No answer. So I let myself in. I still had a key. Emily had insisted I keep it. Inside, it smelled like stale coffee and grief. Dishes were piled in the sink. Mail on the floor. Jackets thrown over chairs. But what struck me most was the silence. Jason was on the couch, still wearing the clothes from the day before. The TV was on but muted. He didn't even look at me. "Where are the boys?" I asked. He blinked. "Next door. With the Harrisons." That was all. I didn't ask permission. I just started cleaning. Washed the dishes. Took out the trash. Picked up toys. Washed a load of laundry. At some point, I cooked a small pot of soup, Emily's favorite recipe. Just the smell of it nearly broke me. The boys came home later that night. They were quiet. Confused. Max clung to me like a shadow. Oliver kept asking where Mommy went. Jason didn't answer. I did. With stories. With warmth. With presence. And for the next few weeks, I stayed. I became a ghost caretaker. The one who made meals, did laundry, helped with homework, packed lunches, kept the engine of the house running. Jason drifted. Some days he didn't speak at all. Other days he snapped at nothing. I chalked it up to grief. Everyone grieves differently. But the cracks started showing. One night, I walked into the living room and found Jason staring at an old photo of him and Emily. He didn't look up. "You think you're helping," he muttered. "But you're just filling space." I stood still. "What do you mean?" He turned. His eyes were red, and not just from crying. "You always do this," he said. "You come in. Take over. Act like the hero. Like this is your family." That hit harder than I expected. I didn't say anything. What could I say? I went back to the guest room and shut the door. Over the next few days, things got colder. Jason started handling the kids more himself. Badly, but still. He stopped eating my meals. Locked himself in his room for hours. When I tried to offer help, he waved me off. Then, one morning, he came into the kitchen while I was making coffee. "You need to go," he said. I froze. "Excuse me. I need space. For me. For the boys. You've done enough. Jason, I'm your father. And I'm not a child anymore," he snapped. "I don't need babysitting. This is my house." He used those words. My house. And though it felt like a knife, I nodded. I packed my things. One suitcase. A few shirts. My toothbrush. He didn't even walk me to the door. I stood on the porch, looking at the home I helped build. The home I paid for. And I left without another word. I didn't cry when I left. Not in the cab. Not when I got to the small rented room above an auto shop. Not even when I unpacked and realized I'd forgotten my shaving kit. But that night, lying on a thin mattress with springs that squeaked every time I moved, I stared at the ceiling for hours. And I finally let it hit me. I had been erased. Just like that. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly, I felt hollow. Like my role, father, grandfather, helper, had expired. And no one had bothered to tell me the show was over. The room I rented was nothing special. A single window, a rickety desk, a creaky fan, and a view of the alley behind a bakery. It smelled like old oil and yeast. But it was quiet. And sometimes, quiet is all you need to think clearly. I spent the first few weeks just existing. Walking to the park. Reading old paperbacks. Eating canned soup. Watching people pass by like I didn't belong to the world anymore. And for a time, I believed I didn't. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Emily's sister, Tina. She'd heard what happened. "I just wanted you to know," she said gently. "Emily adored you. She told me all the time that the boys were lucky to have a grandfather like you." I didn't respond. "She wouldn't have wanted this," she added, her voice shaking. After we hung up, I sat in silence. Her words echoed louder than anything Jason had said. That night, I dug out an old notebook and made a list. A list of everything I had done for my son. From buying his first bike, to paying off his college loans, to handing over that house with a quiet handshake. And at the bottom, I wrote one sentence. What did he do for me? Something inside me shifted. Not into bitterness. Not into revenge. Into clarity. For the first time in years, I realized I had nothing left to lose, and that meant I had everything to rebuild. I called my old friend Carl, who ran a repair shop nearby. You still need help? I asked. From an old man with bad knees? Always, he laughed. And just like that, I started working again. Part-time, easy stuff. Changing oil, checking spark plugs, sweeping the floor. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt good. I felt useful. Carl paid me cash. I didn't need much. I saved every penny. I also started volunteering at the community center. They needed someone to run a weekend reading group for kids. The moment a little girl climbed into my lap with a picture book, I felt something warm light up in my chest. I wasn't done. I wasn't invisible. I still had value. One rainy evening, I found myself looking through the folder where I'd kept the documents for Jason's house. The original contracts, bank transfers, deed copies. And that's when I noticed something. Though I'd signed over the house to Jason, I had never formally removed myself as the financial co-owner on certain back-end records. Technically, I still had legal footing. I didn't smile. I didn't plot. I just quietly began researching what I could do, with dignity, not spite. It wasn't about taking revenge. It was about taking back me. I didn't tell anyone what I had found in the paperwork. Not Carl. Not the lawyer I visited a few days later. Not even Tina, who had become something of a quiet support system for me. Because this wasn't about proving anything to others. It was about proving something to myself. That I wasn't just a forgotten old man tossed aside after serving his purpose. The lawyer, Ms. Crawford, was sharp, no nonsense. She looked over the documents and raised an eyebrow. Did your son know you still retained partial ownership on file? I shook my head. Doubt it. I never told him. I just handed him the keys. She tapped her pen against the folder. Well, she said with a hint of amusement, you could technically claim legal leverage. Especially if you were the sole financier. I don't want to sue him, I said. I just want out. Clean and quiet. She smiled. There are ways to do that. Over the next few weeks, Ms. Crawford handled everything. I authorized the sale of the property. Quietly. Legally. Since Jason hadn't been making regular tax payments, the fool didn't even realize he was responsible for them. It wasn't hard to present grounds for my share to be liquidated. The house went on the market discreetly. A cash buyer snapped it up within days. The final amount? Just over $480,000. After legal fees and taxes, I walked away with $410,000 in my account. I didn't tell Jason. Not out of malice. But because I didn't owe him that anymore. Instead, I walked into a small coastal town about 30 miles away, just far enough to feel new, but close enough to visit the boys someday, if they ever wanted me. I found a modest 2-bedroom cottage with a garden out back. I paid in full. No mortgage. No strings. My new home was simple, but it was mine. The kind of place where you could drink coffee on the porch and hear birds instead of traffic. I started a routine. Morning walks. Evening books. And sometimes, when the wind blew a certain way, I thought about Linda and whispered, "You'd like it here." I also made a decision. Every month, I took a portion of the money and set it aside for Oliver and Max. Not for Jason. Never again for him. Just the boys. College funds. Quiet savings. Something to hand them when the time came. Because no matter what happened, they were my family too. And I hadn't forgotten them. One day, while planting tomatoes in the backyard, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. It was Jason. His voice was shaky. Hollow. "Dad. I don't know if you're still around. I don't know what to say. Everything's falling apart. The house, the kids. I don't know what I'm doing." He didn't ask for help. But he was drowning. I didn't call back. Not yet. Because sometimes, people need to learn what it feels like to be alone. To understand what they took for granted. And sometimes, karma doesn't shout. It waits. It was a Thursday afternoon. The sky was pale and still. I was sitting on my porch, reading a weathered copy of East of Eden, when I heard a car pull into the gravel driveway. Slow. Hesitant. I looked up, and there he was. Jason. He hadn't changed much. Maybe a little thinner, a little more tired around the eyes. He stood next to his car like he didn't know what to do with his hands. One held a crumpled paper bag. The other kept twitching toward his pocket like he was thinking of turning around and leaving. He hadn't called. Hadn't written. But there he was. I stood up, placed my book on the table, and waited. He walked up the steps slowly. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. I nodded. "You found the address?" "Tina," he replied quietly. I gestured to the chair across from me. He sat down. Not like a man visiting his father. Like someone waiting for a verdict. For a minute, we just sat in silence. The breeze picked up. Leaves danced across the yard. I lost the house," he said, not meeting my eyes. I didn't respond. The mortgage payments, there were notices, but I didn't open them. Then it was gone. I didn't understand. "I sold it," I said calmly. His head snapped toward me. "What?" I was still listed on the documents. Technically, I had the right. "You weren't keeping up with the taxes. I took care of it." You sold my house?" "No, Jason," I said. "My house. Paid for with my money. Given to you out of love. And thrown back at me like trash." His mouth opened, then closed. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did," I said gently. "Maybe not fully. Maybe not consciously. But you meant to push me out. You meant to erase me." He went quiet. I let the silence stretch. "The boys?" I asked finally. "With Emily's parents. They've been helping. I couldn't handle everything. And now." He looked at me, eyes glassy. "Now I've got nothing. No house. No job. No one." I stared at him. "That's not true," I said. "You still have your sons. If you don't ruin that too." He winced. "Dad, I messed up." "Yes, you did. I'm sorry." I looked at him. Not as a father looking at a son. But as a man looking at another man who had broken something precious. "I know," I said. He reached into the bag and pulled out a small container. "Peach pie," he mumbled. "Used your recipe." I took it and placed it on the table. "Thank you," I said. He looked down. I don't expect anything. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. I nodded. After a long pause, I stood up. You want to come in for coffee? He looked at me, surprised. Really? For 10 minutes, I said. That's all. He followed me inside. We sat at the kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee, untouched between us. The silence was thick, but not hostile. It was the silence of 2 people walking through a graveyard of old mistakes. Jason kept glancing around. It's nice, he said finally. The house. It's peaceful. I like it, I replied. It's quiet. And mine. He gave a faint nod, then lowered his gaze to the table. Dad, I've been thinking about everything. About you. About what I said. What I did. I didn't interrupt. He took a shaky breath. I think I was angry at myself. After Emily died, I blamed myself for not being there. For not driving her home that night. And you being around, it just reminded me of how much I was failing. I stared into my coffee. And so, I said, you took it out on me. He flinched. I didn't mean to. But you did, I said firmly. You pushed me out of the only family I had left. You used your grief like a shield, and when that wasn't enough, you turned your back on the one person who showed up when no one else did. Jason was quiet. Do you know what it felt like, I continued, to be told to leave the house I bought for you? To be told I wasn't needed? After burying your mother, after burying my own grief to support yours, you told me I was just taking up space. He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Jason. I'm telling you this because for the first time in your life, you need to listen. His eyes were full of tears now. You were a good kid, I said. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as a person. I became a resource. A background character in your life. You didn't just reject me as a father. You discarded me as a human being. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his jacket. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered. I don't know how to fix it. You don't, I said quietly. He looked up, startled. You can't fix it. Not like it was. Some things, once broken, don't go back the same way. But that doesn't mean nothing can be built again. It just means you start different. Jason nodded slowly. I want to start again, he said. I want to be better. For the boys. For you. If you'll let me. I stood up and walked to the counter, pulled out a folder. Inside was a savings bond. 2, actually. 1 for Oliver. 1 for Max. I've been saving for them, I said. They deserve a future, no matter what happens between us. He stared at the folder. You've been doing this all year? I nodded. Because I never stopped loving them. Or you. But I had to start loving myself too. That meant walking away. Jason broke down then. He cried, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet, childlike sobs of someone who'd finally run out of pride. And I sat back down. Let him cry. Because sometimes, that's the only thing left to do. After the tears faded, we sat in silence again. This time, it was softer. Not awkward. Not heavy. Just quiet. Jason wiped his face, took a sip of his coffee. It had gone cold. I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said. No, I replied honestly. You don't. But that's not what you need. He looked up, confused. You need to forgive yourself, I said. You need to face the man you were, and decide who you want to be now. That has nothing to do with me." He nodded slowly, processing. Then came the question I knew was coming. "Can I stay here? Just for a while. Until I get back on my feet?" I looked at him. Not in anger. Not in fear. But with the full clarity of a man who had walked through fire and rebuilt his own foundation. "You can't stay here, Jason," I said gently. His face tightened. "I want to help," he said. "I can fix the garden. Help with repairs." "This house isn't about needing help," I interrupted. "This is the first space I've ever had that was just mine. No ghosts. No conditions. No shame." He opened his mouth, but I shook my head. "I love you, son. But I won't go back to a life where I disappear to make you feel comfortable." I walked to the counter and took a small envelope. Inside was a prepaid rental voucher and a list of community support resources. Housing, counseling, even a contact at a job placement agency I'd found months ago. I handed it to him. "This isn't punishment," I said. "It's an invitation to start again, not just with me, but with yourself." Jason stared at the envelope. "You really thought of all this?" "I thought of everything, Jason. That's what fathers do. Even when their sons forget." He stood slowly, the envelope clutched in his hand. "I understand," he said. "I think. I really do." I walked him to the door. The air outside had cooled. The sky turning gold. He turned to me. "I'll call. Not just when I need something. I promise." I nodded. "I'd like that." He walked down the steps, across the gravel, and got into his car. As he pulled away, he paused, looked back one last time. I raised my hand in a small wave. And then, he was gone. I went back inside. Sat on the porch. Picked up my book. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something simple and honest. Peace. Not because I'd won, but because I had chosen myself. It's been 8 months since that day. Jason kept his word. He calls every week. He even brought the boys over once, for a picnic in the garden. They were taller, louder, full of questions. "Grandpa, why don't you live with Daddy anymore?" I just smiled and said, "Because sometimes, grown-ups need their own space to grow, too." They accepted that. Children understand more than we give them credit for. Jason found work. Not glamorous, but steady. He's renting a small place near the school, walking distance from the playground. He still struggles, I can hear it in his voice. But he's trying. He listens more. Asks how I'm doing, not just what I can do for him. It's not perfect. But then again, nothing worth rebuilding ever is. Sometimes, when I sit on the porch with my coffee, I think about Linda. I think about Emily. And I wonder what they'd say if they saw how it all turned out. I think they'd be proud. Not because everything is fixed, but because something real grew from the mess. Something honest. Something grounded. If you're listening to this, and you've been where I was, forgotten, discarded, pushed aside, I want you to know this. You are not done. You still matter. And walking away from those who hurt you doesn't make you cold. It makes you strong. It makes you free. Sometimes, karma doesn't come with fire and fury. Sometimes, it comes with a quiet cup of coffee on a porch you paid for yourself. And the sound of your own heartbeat finally at peace. Fade out, soft music begins. Narrator, calm voice. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched you, leave a comment, share your thoughts, or tell your own. Because every voice deserves to be heard. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge is peace.